In this video, I'll be going over every standard 5-star character in Genshin Impact, judging whether or not they have improved since their release and in Genshin Impact's lifespan. What can make a character better in Genshin falls into a few categories, such as better artifacts, as Genshin releases new artifact sets every few patches or so, typically being very niche for a new unit that released around that time. New weapons can improve the fighting and utility capabilities of a number of characters in the game, though this falls into weapons passives and not the stats, meaning not every new 5-star weapon can be used on other people, unless it's just a stat stick. And the obvious, new characters / team comms can really bring back a lot of the old forgotten characters to meta, though this is a bit of a stretch as most of these characters aren't built well, so it's clunky to even use them. Some of these characters have seen some notable improvements, which I thought was worth making a video on, so if you're a fan of a specific standard 5-star, then stick around until I talk about them. To start, we're going to talk about everyone's favorite, ChiCi. She's the only cryo 5-star character that's standard, and also one of the oldest, meaning veterans have been pulling her since the early days of Genshin. Unfortunately, ChiCi hasn't had any new best-in-slot artifacts since Tenacity of the Lilith and Clam, which are still great options for her, but it didn't make her good then, so it won't now. Songs of Days Past can be used by her. It's not horrible, but I wouldn't call it an improvement. For weapons, there hasn't been a 5-star character similar to ChiCi who uses a sword, so unfortunately she's still stuck with Favonius for support and Aquila for damage, unless you have Jade Cutter. As for teams, her best comp is still stuck on tasers and hyperfridge. You can use Farina with her, and as a healer DPS, it's not the worst synergy. But her saving grace was escoffier for freeze teams, but Chi-Chi's cryo damage is horrible, as she prefers dealing physical damage over cryo. If Hoyo gave her cryo infusion on release, she wouldn't be in such a hopeless situation. I'm sorry Chi-Chi mains, your character has a cool burst, but is fundamentally bad. Next we'll talk about Jean. Jean's biggest strength is her Sunfire comms, which entail her of combining her ult with Bennett's, creating constant power application on teammates, therefore enemies in the fields. To achieve this, and honestly anything else you use for her, she would want to use Viridescent Venerer. There hasn't been any suitable replacement for it, so Jean mains are glued to that set for the foreseeable future. No new optimal EM swords, so she's stuck with Freedom Sworn and an Iron Sting. Jade Cutter and Mist Splitter for attack and damage buffs, if you want to use her for damage instead of elemental reactions, which isn't bad. Overall, she hasn't really moved on from Sunfire, but was a really good teammate for Farina on release. But since then there's been much better options, so now she's back to where she started. No reason to use her for support either if you have Sucrose or Kazuya, which offers more damage usually. Therefore, I give her no improvement. For a long time after her release, Kaching has been a very underwhelming character. Her kit was okay and flowed decently, but her scaling wasn't ideal, so she wasn't clearing content at a comfortable pace. This all changed when Denjo was released, as it did for many other Electro units. With Denjo, Aggravate became Kaching's best reaction, solving the issue of simply not putting out enough Electro damage. Not only that, the changes to Thundering Fury made her even more potent, skyrocketing her effectiveness as a main DPS. Not only that, Gilded Dreams is only slightly worse, but is an incredibly effective domain to farm. For weapons, not much has changed in that department. Go for crit. If not, EM weapons like Iron Sting are okay too. That's not all though. With the release of Chevreuse, Overload Kaching is not completely horrible and can clear content that likes that specific reaction as well, like Geo Shields. She has seen significant improvements with team synergies and artifacts. I'm giving her great improvement, not a bad 50-50 to lose. Denjo rewards consistency over burst. Tighnari is the latter, which makes him not the most ideal Denjo unit. He's a quick and main DPS who doesn't need to be in the field for long, so it's suitable for teams that like to cycle very quickly. Use Deepwood if he's the only Denjo on the team, if not, Wanderers and Gilded Dreams. Any bow with crit rate and damage is optimal. Elegy of the End is fine too, surprisingly. Slingshots for free to play. Pair him with Electro units and he's good to go. Optimally, go 2 Electro, 2 Denjo. Really stagnant character, I'm giving no improvement. Next up we got Mona. Mona specializes in supporting burst characters like Raiden Shogun. However, since then there has been a drought of characters in need of her services. She has been sidelined and is not optimal for a lot of the characters right now. She still uses Noblesse Oblige, she still likes throwing Tales of Dragon Slayers and Favonius Codex. I would like to say use her with Malvika, but Malvika functions better with Natlan characters because of her Night Soul burst charge. Still doable though. I think she still has potential. If we bide our time, Hoyo will release a burst champ that works very well with her. Surely, but I wouldn't dread getting her if you don't already. Okay, now we're moving on to the real standard powerhouses. These guys have improved exponentially, with new characters and new artifacts. Diluc was the strongest, most reliable pyro DPS unit upon release. This lasted until Hu Tower was released and completely outshined him. Since they used the same artifacts and teammates at the time, there wasn't much room for him, until Ganyu came out and made Dragon Strike Diluc his greatest form. But why is it so good? Well, as a Claymore character, and since this playstyle wasn't intended by Hoyo on release, he has insane plunge multipliers, even more than Zhao, a character dedicated to plunges, which is really sad by the way. This comp optimally contains Bennett, Furina, or Citlali, and Ganyu. This allows Diluc to vape or melt his plunges as he has his own pyro infusion. This comp can do really well in endgame content, which is fantastic for a standard unit. Tidal Shadow works great in plunge teams and is craftable, but almost any 5-star Claymore with crit can work too. They recently also released an artifact set for plunging, which yes can be ran with them and is a great improvement. Crimson Witch is still okay if that's all you have. Not only is Plunge Diluc good, but with Chevreuse, Diluc can also have an overload team, which is also very comfortable, might even be stronger than his standard vape comps. Because of all these changes, Diluc has become the most valued DPS on the standard banner. Even though his Ascension 1 is useless, getting more copies of him might turn out very well for your account, so he gets a great improvement. I can talk about Diluc all day, but now let's talk about Dia. Dia was the most hated unit on release. A lot of players were actually believing that Hoyo made her abilities bad just to screw with us, especially with how well anticipated she was. Hoyo even tried rectifying this by releasing a tailor-made artifact set for her, but it turned out to be worse than the alternatives, so there was no reason to farm it. However, over time, she has become a very strong support and a capable DPS. For the support role, she has an abundance of artifact options, like these. Scroll of the Hero is also a good option for her since the buffs are pretty good. Use Fav as well with the crit rate circlet, or you can run Makira if you have it. But the biggest reason why Dia support has seen an improvement is because there's a plethora of units that can use her, like Nuvolette, Risley, Mualani. Knight especially pairs up with her nicely. These are very strong popular units that would like her on their very strong and popular teams. She's not typically best in slot, but still extremely effective as a support. And since the release of Furina and Chev, she can be played as a main DPS, either vaping with Furina or overloading with Chev. Both are strong, both require Bennett, so take your pick. Great improvement. Last up, we got the latest addition to the roster, Mizuki. Now there hasn't been that much time since her release to give her an improvement rating, so for now I'll discuss if her addition to the standard banner was an improvement. And honestly, not really. She's an on-field swirl DPS with very flexible off-field teammates, as long as they are Pyro, Cryo, Hydro, and Electro. She floats around the battlefield, swirling enemies and shredding their resistance with Viridescent. She also heals while swirling, making Furina her best teammate. Likes EM Catalyst, Hakushin to buff her team, that's about it. She's pretty generic for an Enemo character, but is also unique in a way. She scales well with Constellations, so I really do hope you lose your 50-50 to her and no one else.
Cool it!